Pastor Elijah Williams had spent his whole life in service to God. At 42 years old, he was the senior pastor of New Light Missionary Baptist Church, one of the most respected black churches in Atlanta, Georgia. He was the kind of man people trusted because he practiced what he preached. He did not just teach the word, he lived it out. His congregation respected him, sought his wisdom, his prayers, and his guidance. However, the most important thing in his life, next to his faith, was his family. His wife, Hannah Williams, was his prayer warrior, his partner in ministry, and the woman who had stood by him since he was a young preacher with nothing but a Bible and a calling. They had 2 children, their daughter Michaela, a 15-year-old honor student, and their son Elijah Jr., a playful but intelligent 10-year-old. Together, they were a picture of a blessed family. One fateful Sunday, as usual, Pastor Elijah got ready for service with his family. The sanctuary was filled with worshippers. The choir was in full spirits, singing an old hymn that had the entire congregation on their feet. Elijah sat in his chair, feeling the power of the Spirit moving through the room. He was ready to preach, and this morning he had a powerful word, one about holding on to faith, even in the darkest trials. Pastor Elijah stepped up to the pulpit with his Bible in one hand. Somebody give God a shout of praise in this house. The church erupted in amens and hallelujahs. The presence of God was heavy in the room. Pastor Elijah smiled as he opened his Bible. Today, I want to talk about staying faithful through the storm. But just before he could say anything further, a loud voice came through from behind the sanctuary. Ladies and gentlemen, the words echoed through the microphone, stopping Pastor Elijah mid-sentence. People turned and frowned. A young woman, presumably in her early 20s, carrying a newborn baby, walked up to the middle of the church. She was caramel-skinned, with long curly hair, wearing tight jeans and a fitted crop top. Definitely not Sunday church attire. She looked mean, and when she spoke again, her words were sharp. "Meet my baby daddy." A loud woo spread through the church. Mothers hugged their children tightly, and the deacons exchanged confused glances. Then they turned towards Pastor Elijah. Hannah was also dumbfounded. Pastor Elijah blinked, trying to catch up with what was going on. What? The young woman took another step forward. "Yeah, you heard me. This man, your pastor, your so-called man of God, is the father of my baby." Everywhere was silent, and they all turned towards Hannah, their pastor's wife, who looked like she had just suffered a heart attack. Pastor Elijah couldn't breathe. What exactly was happening? I don't even know you. The woman laughed bitterly. "Oh, you don't know me now? But you knew me when you laid up in my bed, didn't you?" Pastor Elijah froze. "That's not true. You're lying." The woman folded her arms and scoffed. "You're the man of God, right? The one always preaching about righteousness. Why don't you tell your wife the truth? Tell her how you was laying up in my bed while she was at home praying for you." Pastor Elijah turned to look at Hannah, and for the first time in their 16-year marriage, he saw doubt and confusion. She fought back the tears in her eyes as she slowly shook her head. "Elijah, tell me the truth." The weight of her words crushed him. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His entire world was crumbling right in front of him. And then the young lady turned and stormed out of the church, leaving behind chaos, whispers, and doubts. It felt like the spirits had left the building. Pastor Elijah still stood at the pulpit, but his congregation looked at him like they were seeing him for the first time. The same congregation that had just been praising God minutes ago now looked at him with confusion, suspicion, and even judgment. The seed of doubt had been planted, and in that moment, Pastor Elijah Williams realized something. It didn't matter if the accusation was true or not. People believed what they want to believe, and his reputation, his ministry, his family, in fact, everything he had built and stood for was now on the verge of destruction. Just then, Deacon Clarence Johnson, the most respected elder in the church, broke the silence. "Son, I have been working with the Lord for over 50 years, and I know when the enemy attacks. But I also know," he hesitated, trying to choose his next words carefully. "I also know that sometimes temptation creeps into a man's life without warning." Pastor Elijah's heart skipped a beat. What was Deacon implying? Was he giving him a chance to confess? Then the deacon cleared his throat and looked at Pastor Elijah dead in his eyes. Did you step outside your marriage, son?" Elijah's heart slammed against his ribs. He shook his head violently. "No, I have never been unfaithful to my wife. I don't know that woman." Another deacon, Reggie Carter, stood up to interrupt. "Pastor, I think the church deserves an explanation." But Pastor Elijah protested further. "I already said I don't know that woman." Reggie shrugged. "Well, Pastor, we all heard what she said. And in this day and age, DNA don't lie. This is a very serious allegation." Deacon Clarence finally said, "Son, for the sake of the church and for the sake of your family, maybe it is best if you take some time away until the truth comes out." Pastor Elijah's heart sank. He should step down after all these years, after everything he had built. His heart sank the more as he saw people nodding in agreement. His own flock, the ones he had prayed for, baptized and counseled, were turning against him. And when he turned to look at Hannah, his wife, she wasn't saying a word. She looked completely lost, as though she didn't know what to believe anymore. He got off the pulpit and walked towards the door with his head bowed down. He waited for his wife in the car, and when she got in, the car ride home was dead silent. Hannah sat in the passenger seat, staring blankly out of the window with her arms folded. Finally, after 10 minutes of silence, she spoke. "You got anything to say?" Pastor Elijah exhaled sharply. "Hannah, you know I didn't cheat on you." She let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, so the girl just imagined a whole relationship with you. She imagined a baby too?" Pastor Elijah's hands tightened on the wheel. "I don't know her, Hannah." Hannah turned to him and looked at him squarely. "Then why do I feel like you lying to me?" Now that cut deep. Pastor Elijah slammed on the brakes and the car jerked to a stop, throwing them both forward. A car behind them honked loudly, but he didn't care. He turned to face her. "You think I would throw away our whole marriage for some random woman?" Hannah folded her arms. "I don't know what to think anymore, Elijah." At that moment, Pastor Elijah felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. His own wife too, the woman who had prayed for him, fasted with him, and fought beside him, didn't trust him anymore. His hands trembled as he put the car back in drive and pulled into their driveway. They sat there for a moment. Finally, Hannah spoke, but the words broke him the more. "If you ever loved me, Elijah, tell me the truth." Elijah reached for her hand, but she pulled away. And in that moment, he knew that this could destroy everything. That night, Their home felt different. Hannah barely looked at him. She stayed longer in the kitchen, staring out of the window, lost in thoughts, and holding a glass of water for long. Michaela and Elijah Jr. too sat at the dining table in silence, which was rare. Usually, dinner time in their home was filled with laughter, storytelling, and prayer. But tonight, the air was heavy and tense. Pastor Elijah went to the kitchen to meet his wife. He took a deep breath before calling out to her, "Hannah." She didn't turn around. He continued anyway. "I know you are hurting. I know this looks bad, but I need you to believe me." She slowly placed the glass of water she was holding on the counter, as if she were thinking carefully about her words. Then she turned and faced him. "I want to believe you, Elijah, but I don't know if I can." Her words hit him like a knife to the chest. However, just when Pastor Elijah thought the night couldn't get any worse, the doorbell rang. When he opened the door, he frowned. It was Reggie Carter standing there. "What do you want?" Reggie looked concerned and stepped in without being invited. "Pastor, that's no way to talk to your fellow brother in Christ." He looked around and smiled. "Nice place." Then his eyes landed on Hannah, who was standing in the doorway. "Sister Hannah," he greeted. Hannah nodded but didn't say a word. Reggie shook his head dramatically. "Man, I hate what's happening to you, Pastor. I mean, a scandal like this? Who? If it were me, I wouldn't know how to survive it." But Pastor Elijah was not interested in his formalities, so he cut to the chase. "Why are you here, Reggie?" Reggie sighed. "Well, I just wanted to offer a solution." Pastor Elijah folded his arms. "I'm listening." Reggie continued. "I was thinking, if you decide to step down as pastor, just for a while, to handle your personal matters, I would be more than happy to take over the church in your absence." Pastor Elijah burst out into a cold, bitter laugh. "Oh, I see it now. This was your plan all along, wasn't it?" Reggie raised an eyebrow. "What plan?" "You've been waiting for years to take my place, and now you think you can just walk in and take what I built?" Reggie shrugged. "I was just trying to help, Pastor." Pastor Elijah took a step forward. "Let me tell you something, Reggie. I may be down right now, but I ain't finished, and I promise you, the truth will come out." Reggie smirked. "Then, let's see what the DNA test says. I heard the young lady is filing for child support." With that, he turned and walked out. But before he left, he looked at Hannah. "Be strong, Sister Hannah. Women like you deserve the truth." 5 days later, at the lawyer's office, Pastor Elijah stared at the DNA test results in shock. It was a 99.9 positive match. The paper trembled in his hands and his heart pounded loudly. It felt like the room was spinning. This couldn't be real. It wasn't possible. He had never touched that woman before. But the test said otherwise. Beside him, Hannah stood looking lost. Her eyes were filled with hurt, disbelief, and betrayal. She took a step back. No, Elijah, please tell me this ain't true." Pastor Elijah's voice cracked. I don't know how, but this test is wrong. Hannah, you gotta believe me." She shook her head sadly. "But it's a DNA test, Elijah. DNA don't lie." Pastor Elijah fell to his knees. This was exactly what his enemies wanted. To break him, to destroy his marriage, to strip him of his church, his respect and his name. And the worst part, it was working. Hannah turned away. She felt like she was suffocating. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. Elijah had always been her safe space, her rock. She had prayed for him, fasted for him, stood by him when people doubted his vision. But now, everything felt like a lie. She wanted to scream, to cry, to run. Most of all, she wanted the truth. She turned back to Elijah with tears in her eyes. "Tell me the truth, Elijah. Did you sleep with that woman?" "No." The desperation in his voice was real, but the doubt in her heart was louder. The lawyer, Mr. Thomas, cleared his throat. "Pastor Williams, I know this is hard to process, but the results are solid. There is no mistake." Pastor Elijah walked into the house. His mind was on fire. Social media was going crazy and the church was talking. Some members were still on his side, but others were already calling for him to step down. His marriage was also on the line, but he wasn't about to lose everything over a lie. So he did what he should have done from the start. He called in for a favor. Pastor Elijah sat with Detective Malcolm Green, an old friend from college. Malcolm had once been one of Atlanta's top investigators, but now he worked private cases. "Somebody set me up, Malcolm. I need to know who and why." Malcolm studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I will dig, but you need to be ready. You might not like what I find." Pastor Elijah's jaw tightened. He was ready because this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about his family, his name, and his faith. Pastor Elijah pulled into the driveway with anxiety that evening. He knew things at home were bad, but when he walked inside, it was worse than he expected. Hannah was in the living room with her suitcases packed. "I'm going to Mama's," she said bluntly. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were red from crying. Pastor Elijah couldn't let her go. "Hannah, please, don't do this. I didn't cheat on you." She looked at him for a long time. Then, without saying a word, she grabbed her suitcase and walked out of the door. After Hannah left, life never remained the same for Pastor Elijah. One early morning, he sat in his car thinking about what his life had become. Just as he was about to drive away, his phone vibrated. It was a text from an unknown number that read, "Meet me at the old coffee shop on 5th. You need to know the truth before it's too late." Pastor Elijah's heart skipped. Who was this? Could it be a trap? But something in his guts told him he needed to go. And so, after saying a silent prayer, he turned the ignition and drove. The coffee shop was almost empty, and the only person sitting in the back was a young woman in a hoodie, stirring her coffee nervously. Pastor Elijah approached her cautiously, but as soon as she looked up, he stopped in his tracks. It was Monique Brown, the same woman who accused him in church, the woman who ruined his life. Immediately, Pastor Elijah's blood boiled hot. "You got some nerve asking me to meet you. Haven't you done enough?" Monique looked remorseful. "Pastor, please, I messed up. I need to fix this." Pastor Elijah folded his arms. "Fix what?" She swallowed hard. I lied." Pastor Elijah couldn't believe his ears. "What did you just say?" Monique repeated. "I lied. You aren't the father of my child. You never were." Pastor Elijah's chest tightened. He felt anger, relief, and confusion all at once. "Then why? Why would you do this to me?" Monique bit her lip. "Because I was paid to." Pastor Elijah froze. "Paid? Someone paid her to destroy him? Who paid you?" Monique hesitated before scribbling a name on a piece of paper. Pastor Elijah wasted no time. He called Detective Malcolm Green, his old friend who was already investigating the setup. "I have proof," Elijah said. "I need you to dig deeper. Find everything you can on Reggie Carter." Green's voice was sharp. "I'm on it." Next, he called Deacon Clarence Johnson, the only elder in the church he still trusted. "Can we meet? We need to talk." On Sunday morning, New Light Missionary Baptist Church was filled as usual, but the energy was different this time. People weren't here for worship. They were here for scandal, for gossip, and for drama. Deacon Reggie stood at the pulpit smiling like a king. "Brothers and sisters, I know these past few weeks have been difficult, but I want you all to know this church will always have a leader, even when the enemy tries to shake us." Pastor Elijah clenched his jaw. This man was already acting like the pastor, but enough was enough. He stepped forward and shouted, "Reggie Carter, you are a liar and a thief." Reggie froze. "Excuse me?" Pastor Elijah wasted no time. He pulled out his phone and hit play. Monique's voice rang through the speakers. "I lied. Pastor Williams ain't the father. Reggie paid me to set him up." The church exploded in shocking disbelief. Reggie tried to defend himself. "Y'all don't believe this, do you?" But then Detective Malcolm Green stepped inside, and behind him were two police officers. The congregation fell silent. Pastor Elijah Green said, "I think it's time to expose the rest." Pastor Elijah nodded and turned back to the congregation. "Not only did Reggie pay to set me up, but he's been stealing from this church for years." The congregation went into another round of shock. Just then, Deacon Clarence stood up and held up bank records. This man took thousands from the church accounts, and he thought nobody would find out. Reggie's face twisted in panic, and he shouted, "You can't prove that." But Detective Green smirked. "Actually, we can." He nodded to the officers. "Arrest him." The police stepped forward. At that point, Reggie Carter looked around. "No, wait, this ain't right. You can't do this to me." But the handcuffs clicked shut, and he was whisked away. The congregation looked dumbfounded as they watched their former deacon, the man who tried to destroy their pastor, get taken away. Pastor Elijah too watched as the devil in a suit was dragged out of his church, and he felt deep relief. Finally, the storm was over, but the flood was yet to dry. Pastor Elijah sat in his empty house, staring at the framed photo of his wedding. The smiling couple in the picture felt like strangers now. Hannah had been gone for 2 weeks. 2 weeks since she walked out. Yet, even with the truth exposed, Elijah could still feel the damage that had been done. His marriage was hanging by a thread. His church was wounded, and his faith had been shaken to its core. God had brought him through the fire, but what was left after the flames? A burned down marriage, a divided church, and a man of God barely holding himself together. The silence of the house was louder than any sermon he had ever preached. Then he knocked at the door. Pastor Elijah jumped up and rushed to open it, praying it was Hannah. But when he pulled the door open, it was Michaela, his 15-year-old daughter. "Daddy!" Elijah pulled her into his arms before she could say another word. The father and daughter sat on the couch in silence. Finally, she asked, "Is it really over?" Pastor Elijah sighed. "Reggie is in jail, and the whole church knows I was innocent." Michaela nodded slowly, but Mama still left. Elijah's chest tightened. "I know." His daughter turned to him. "Dad, You always said faith was about trusting God, even when things didn't make sense. Do you still believe that? Elijah swallowed hard. Michaela had heard his sermons for years. She had seen him counsel broken marriages, pray for the sick, and stand firm in his faith. But now, she was watching him fight for his own life. He took a deep breath. Yes, even now, especially now, I believe. Michaela nodded slowly. Pastor Elijah then closed his eyes and said a silent prayer. Lord, if I lose everything else, please don't let me lose my family. The following Sunday, Pastor Elijah stood outside New Light Missionary Baptist Church. People passed him, and while some looked at him with pity, others looked at him with respect, but there were some who still had doubts in their eyes. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The moment he walked in, the church felt silent. It was time. He stepped to the pulpit, gripped the edges, and spoke. My name is Elijah Williams. I am a man of God. He let that sink in properly. I have been tested. I have been lied on. I have been broken. But let me tell you something. God is still God. A few amens rang out. I stand here today not because I am strong, but because God's strength is made perfect in weakness. A louder yes, Lord, filled the room. I was falsely accused, but I am still standing. My name was dragged through the dirt, but I am still standing. And church, I will keep standing because God is my defender. By now, the congregation was on their feet, clapping, shouting, and praising. Now, let's revive, Pastor Elijah declared. And just like that, the spirits filled the room. After the service, Pastor Elijah stood outside, shaking hands with members as they left. Then, a familiar car pulled up. Pastor Elijah's heart jumped up as Hannah stepped out elegantly. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then slowly, she walked up to him and said, I am not saying everything is perfect, but if you have me, I would like to come home. Pastor Elijah felt his heart shatter and heal all at once. This was his wife, his love and partner. He didn't hesitate. He pulled her into his arms and held her tightly with tears in his eyes. Always, there is no home without you. And just like that, God restored what the enemy tried to destroy. Thank you for watching the story. Kindly share your thoughts about the story with me in the comment section. What lessons did you learn from the story? Share the story out with your loved ones and give the story a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you've not done so by now. Until I bring another story your way. Bye!